6-2-5-1 chord change and a few different approaches to playing over these changes. Now the 6-2-5-1 is a super common chord progression found in jazz, blues, and gospel. The numbers refer to the chords built from the different intervals in the key. So today I'm going to be playing in the key of B flat. So the 6th chord comes from the 6th note of the B flat major scale, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So G. The 2 chord comes from the 2nd note of the scale, 1, 2, C. And the 5th note comes from the 5th note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So F. For all of today's examples, we're going to be using a dominant 6 chord, a minor 7-2 chord, and a dominant 5 chord. So G7, C minor 7, F7, and then to B flat. There are, however, tons of variations on this chord progression, but that's just the version we're going to be using for today's examples. Now, I like to divide this chord progression into 2 5-to-1 cadences. So G7 is the 5 chord of C minor 7, and F7 is the 5 chord of B flat. This way we get 2 5-to-1 resolutions, and we can build lines that transition through the chords instead of just trying to play over each chord individually. So for this first example, we're going to outline the chord changes using the arpeggio shapes for each chord. In this position right here, I can play the arpeggio for G7, C minor 7, F7, and B flat 7. Now I like to use the chord tones to outline the chord that I'm on and then resolve to a chord tone of the next chord in the progression. Now when you're first starting out, it's a good idea to try to target the chord tone of the next chord on the downbeat of the measure right as the chord change happens. Now we can take this approach and move it around the fretboard into different positions. Here's another example in a different spot on the fretboard. So the better you know these arpeggio shapes, the easier it is to come up with lines like this on the fly. And this is a really good first step for getting started outlining changes and playing lines that really live inside of the chord progression. For this next approach, we're going to look at a couple of arpeggio substitutions we can use. So instead of playing straight dominant 7th arpeggios over the dominant chords, we're going to use diminished 7th arpeggios to give us a dominant 7 flat 9 sound. And for the 2 minor chord, we're going to use a major 7th arpeggio built off the relative major. So this example starts out with a diminished 7th arpeggio over the G7 chord. With functioning dominant chords, you can build a diminished 7th arpeggio off the 3rd, 5th, flat 7th, or flat 9 of the chord. So in the case of G7, that would be B, D, F, or A flat. This gives you the sound of a dominant 7 flat 9 chord. Now I start out this line by just coming down a diminished 7th arpeggio starting on F. And then as we transition to the 2 chords, C minor, instead of playing out of a C minor 7th arpeggio, I go up and play out of the relative major, which is E flat major 7. So C minor and E flat are related. They share the same notes. E flat major scale and a C minor scale share exactly the same notes. So I can use this E flat major 7th arpeggio as a replacement for my C minor 7th arpeggio. And it gives me a really nice sound because it has a D in it, which is the 9th of the chord. So I get this kind of C minor 9 sound. So I play that over the 2 chord, and then moving to the 5 chord, F7, I walk up chromatically to the 3rd of that chord. So walking into the chord tone and landing right on the downbeat. Then from there, I build another diminished 7th arpeggio. And then to resolve to B flat, I walk up chromatically again to the 3rd of B flat. So for this final example, we're going to use the altered dominant scale over the G7 chord and the F7 chord. So the altered dominant scale is something you can use to build extra tension over functioning dominant chords. The scale is root, flat 9, sharp 9, 3rd, flat 5th, sharp 5th, and flat 7th. Now I've always looked at this scale as a recipe for altered dominant chords, where you have the root, the 3rd, and the flat 7th of a dominant chord, and to that you can add the flat 5th, the sharp 5th, the flat 9, or the sharp 9, or any combination of those notes to create some really beautiful altered dominant chords. So in this solo example, over the G7 chord, I play the G altered dominant scale, starting on the sharp 9, and then just moving down through the scale, but skipping over that flat 5th. Then over the 2 chord, I play another E flat major 7th arpeggio. And then moving to the 5 chord, F7, I again play the altered scale, starting on the sharp 9, and then kind of raking down from the root, sharp 5, 3rd, and then coming down sharp 9, flat 9, root, flat 7th, and then landing on the 3rd of our 1 chord B flat to resolve. So these 6-2-5-1 progressions are tons of fun, and they can easily be added to a simple 12-bar blues progression, as I demonstrated with the solo at the very beginning of the video. The possibilities are really endless with these approaches once you start moving them around the fretboard. So hopefully this lesson will give you some inspiration to come up with lines of your own. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.